Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid and another morning ramble. Guys, I'm going to start this ramble with a big disclaimer. That disclaimer being that I am not qualified to give you this advice. What advice is that, Crazy Lake, you might ask? Well, that would be any and all of this advice. Well, if you watch any of our homesteading stuff, when I show you how to homestead, I pretty much show you how not to do that kind of stuff because it rarely works out. Sometimes it does, and we're not giving up, and we're trying to improve with each passing day, week, month, and year, and we're getting better. But, these morning rambles, I come up here and I just kind of talk mostly about past experiences, things I've done, things I've learned as I see it based upon my experiences. And a lot of folks leave some very complimentary, very flattering comments. Some people don't. Some people tell me how much I suck. And it's okay, whatever. But a lot of folks say that they like what they hear. It inspired them. They needed to hear it at this time because of something they're going through. And I shared an awful lot about that here in a recent ramble yesterday. Shared a lot about myself that I haven't shared up until this point, really. But guys, somebody mentioned in a comment, I read it this morning, they mentioned I'm like kind of like a teacher, counselor, preacher, something like that, which is crazy because we don't even talk about religion or politics on this channel. And sometimes these comments will go to my head. So I read because I'm human, okay? I try to keep an eye on narcissistic thinking and behaviors and traits just as much as I would hope most people do, because these are dangerous and they're not nice. They're mean if you inflict them upon others. So, but I read that and went to my head a little bit, and I thought, well, what am I going to talk about today? So I actually thought of the topic of show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are. That whole birds of a feather flock together type thing. But then I stopped and I thought, I don't know if I entirely and completely buy into that, because I don't really have friends. I have acquaintances. I have some very good acquaintances at best, but I intentionally kind of go out of my way to not have friends. And that sounds kind of calloused and cold, and I don't recommend this to people. And again, this is a perfect example of why I'm not really qualified to give the advice I give on here, and you might not want to take all of it. Somebody commented yesterday, and it was the first comment. I wish I would have remembered the name. I read all these, but he said we're the same age. We are so much alike. The person said this was the first time he'd ever commented on a YouTube video ever. And even down to the fact that he likes Stephen King and Ayn Rand as writers. But he mentioned about how he has spent many of the past years building a wall around himself and not letting people in because of the betrayal from others from his past. And it was creepily eerie how much in common I had with this person who left this comment. And Guy, I want to thank you for leaving that comment. And yes, I do relate. So, okay, that has to do with friends. So I'm thinking, how am I supposed to go up here and talk about show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are? And then I thought, okay, and this one girl left this very flattering comment saying I'm like this guy or whatever. I looked up some people on YouTube who actually are motivational speaker types, who actually have large followings, who have, what would you call them, congregations, I guess. And what creeped me out was the fact that some of my videos have more views than their most highly viewed videos. And these people are on television. Guys, please consider anything I say is just some guy in a field with an obsolete iPhone 6 and a $3 digital camera from a thrift store that I use sometimes if I remember to buy batteries, and that's it. And here's proof. Here's a story. This is today's ramble. It's about show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are. This is how unqualified I am to give you any advice really about anything, because the person that kept coming to my mind when I was trying to think of a friend, somebody I could tell you about in my life so I could tell you who I was, and it occurs to me, well, I really don't have friends. I have a lot of acquaintances. I used to have friends. The person that came to my mind was the prospective princess of the Philippine Islands. Now, who the heck is that, Crazy Lake? Who is the prospective princess of the Philippine Islands? Well, She's someone that to this day, I'm not sure if she actually exists. Many of you, and I'm not plugging my book here, many of you have read my book, Isle of Capri. If you haven't, don't. It's not worth your time. It's not worth the money. I look at my book reviews. I recently got a review on one of my other books. It says boring, not worth the time. I agree with that. My books are boring, not worth the time, and certainly not worth the money. But if you have read Isle of Capri, and some people have read that and they've commented in the comment sections that they read it, and somebody said, this is so realistic, I wonder how much of this is real. And the only thing I will tell you is that more than you would think, and I'm not going to tell you which parts are and which parts aren't, that's all up to you. But there's a person in the story called the Prospective Princess of the Philippine Islands who very much was real. That was a true account. Who is she, and why does this make me unqualified to tell you about who you are based upon who your friends are? Let me just tell you about the Prospective Princess of the Philippine Islands. To describe her physically, she's about 4'9". 4'8" too short, 4'10" too tall. I'd put her at 4'9", and she probably weighs 70 to 75 pounds. I'm confident she's an adult, but I couldn't tell you how old she is. I don't know if she's 22 or if she's 52 or if she's 72. And the reason why is because her face is badly burned and scarred, as if perhaps she was in a fire or maybe an accident, maybe a vehicular accident that led to a fire. She's burned and she's scarred, so therefore it makes it difficult to judge her age by her appearance. The first time I saw her, it was outside of a department store in one of the provinces in Mindanao, the southernmost major island of the Philippines, where I lived for quite some time. I'd been there probably 2.5 to 3 years of my nearly 5 years straight long stay in the Philippines that time. And I was walking into a department store. The sidewalks, the streets, it's all crowded. It's just a sea of humanity. And I'm not tall. I'm like 5'9", 5'10". But over there, I was tall. And so it was just like I was always looking around at a sea of heads. And so I'm walking into the department store, and there is this woman who I would come to call the Prospective Princess of the Philippine Islands, sitting at the door as I was walking in, and I thought, oh gosh, here's another beggar. You know, here's someone else on the street. They're going to see me, the Americano, walking in. Here comes the hand. She's going to stick her hand out. And so I look down, getting ready to say no, and say it forcefully, and say it like I mean it, and say it repeatedly if necessary. So I look down. My no is prepared. I'd gotten really good at saying it this way by this time. And the hand doesn't come out. The head goes up, turns up. She sees me. We make eye contact, and I'm sure I'm just glaring at her, looking as mean as I can be, getting ready to tell her no. And she smiles. She just smiles. And she had the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. So I go in the store, and this is in the story, Isle of Capri. If you read it, it almost sounds verbatim because it is. I mean, they say write about what you know. Well, I knew about this because this woman was real and these experiences were real. So I'm in the store, and I think, well, she'll get me on the way out. So I come out, she's gone. She's not even there. So I thought, oh, well, whatever. She stuck out in my mind for two things: the bad scarring from what appeared to be burns on her face, and the smile. The smile was beautiful. So some time passes. I'm out and about, maybe another month or so later, and I'm walking into a place that's called Jollibee. And I'm going back to that place in my mind, and that's why my English is kind of, whatever. I'm going into Jollibee, and she's there in front of the door again, and I'm thinking, oh, there's that beggar again, and she's going to get me this time as I'm going into Jollibee. So I go in. Jollibee is like a fast food restaurant. It's like the Philippines version of McDonald's, but instead of specializing in burgers, they specialize in like fried chicken and rice, or spaghetti and rice. They have burgers. They're okay. So I go in. I get my food takeout for me and dearly. I'm taking it home. It's one of those few situations or circumstances in which I actually have enough money to get takeout. And mind you, over there, the dollar's worth 50 of their pesos. So I walk out and I think, well, she's going to get me on the way out. So I walk out and she's there. I look down at her, prepared to say no again. She looks up at me and she gives me that beautiful smile again. Well, this enrages me because why isn't this beggar begging for me? And I say to her, I say, what, do you want food or something? And she looks at me like she doesn't understand, and she holds up a drumstick as if to say, I already have food. And she looks at me with this blank expression on her face as if to say, why do you think I want something? And so I leave, and I'm thinking, well, she must want something. She must want something. And in a rare moment of not being upset and bitter and jaded and just completely hating my life because I'm stuck in this place I didn't really want to be, and it would be many years after that point before I ever got out of there, I think to myself, could it be that she just wanted to give me that smile of hers? Could it be that she wanted to give me that smile because maybe I'm one of very few people who walk down and actually make eye contact with her? Now, she probably didn't know that the reason I was making eye contact with her was because I was getting ready to tell her no in a very mean and nasty voice. But she seemed to quite enjoy the fact that somebody was making eye contact with her, and as her way of saying thank you, she gave me the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. So, another month or two passes. I used to go on these long walks all the time by myself. I was just always frustrated, angry, bitter, jaded, hated life. And some days were just way worse than others. And I was having one of those days when I was out for a walk, and I was in this part of town that I guess I hadn't, there's so many side streets and alleys, and every time you think you found the last alley in whatever little community you're in, you find another one. And I'm going down one such alley, and there's this wall. All the houses are guarded with walls over there, 10 feet high, razor wire and glass on top. And there's this ditch line right there on the right side of the road beside this wall. And I notice a tarp overhanging the ditch further up, like it's like a lean-to shelter. I think I actually have a video where I showed how to make one of these things with a tarp that's now the top of my chicken house down there. And so I go to pass it, and just out of curiosity, I look up underneath it, and sure enough, there is somebody living under there, and sure enough, it's the prospective princess of the Philippine Islands. It's this tiny little woman who I have no clue how old she is, whose face and arms, any skin you can see is so badly burned. Again, I couldn't pinpoint her age, so I hunker down, I look in there, and she gives me that smile again. And I just sit there, and I said hello. She never spoke to me. I spoke to her at the restaurant. I'd say hi, and I would go back and see her many times. She never spoke. I don't know if her vocal cords were injured. I don't know if maybe she couldn't speak, if she was mute. I don't know if she could hear anything I ever said. And again, thinking of her, I often look back and wonder if she even existed in the first place. Did I mention to you I'm not qualified to give you any and all of this advice? I just want to make sure you got that disclaimer, okay? Here I am questioning whether this person that I used to see on a regular basis exists or not. So I hunkered down, I looked in, and she had these little pebbles, maybe 20, 30 pebbles, and I watched her. She had half on one side, half on the other. She got back to her work, which was moving one pebble from one side to the other side, and she had a little piece of scratch paper and a broken pencil, and when she would move a pebble, she'd make a mark. She was counting. It occurred to me she's counting these pebbles. So I watched, and she got all the pebbles moved to one side. She got all her little notches, her little count notches written down and made, and then she double checked her work, and then she started moving them back. And she flipped her scratch paper over, and she started counting again. She was counting these pebbles. So she looked at me with that smile as if to say, without saying any words, again, I don't think she could speak, as if to ask if I wanted to help her count these little pebbles. And so I reached down, I grabbed a pebble, I moved it over to the other side, and she made a check mark, and she looked at me and she smiled. And so I smiled. I reached down, grabbed another pebble, I moved it over, and she made another check mark, and she smiled and I smiled. And the next thing you know, I'm helping her count all these pebbles. We moved them all over. I don't know how much time I spent with her. But I know when I got up and when I left, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't jaded. I wasn't pissed off. And that's probably the closest I've ever come to cursing on this channel. I should have said I wasn't ticked off. Sorry about that, guys. If you would have heard me talk back in those days, He would have nothing to do with me. So anyway, when I would go on my walks after that, especially if I was frustrated, angry, annoyed, I would go see the prospective princess of the Philippine Islands. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. She usually was, but her tarp was there. I remember one time I went for a walk with Dearly, my beautiful bride, and I wanted to take her by to meet this woman, mostly to see if Dearly saw her, to make sure she was there. I never ran into this woman when Dearly was with me, so Dearly never saw this woman. The tarp was there, and her sparse belongings were there, but we never saw her there together. I would only see her when I was alone. Now, what's this have to do with tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are? I do believe in being very selective with who we surround ourselves with. This is something I learned throughout the years. I am kind of, I have trust issues. I know it. I've made videos about be leery of the first neighbor who brings you an apple pie, and that was because, and guys, I'm sorry. I've been around the block. I've been around the world. And I've got to guard up, like the guy that commented about how much we have in common. He's built a wall around himself. I've broken down the wall. I had that same wall, but I still have the guard. And it does protect me. I mentioned here not too long ago when I made that video about be leery of the first neighbor to bring you an apple pie. Another neighbor out here who's pleasant enough and cordial enough, but for some reason after, more than 2 years of never saying boo, starts showing up, and I'm wondering why. And so I had that guard up. I kept looking, and it turns out he wanted to hunt. He comes by here and he sees a deer on my place, and he wanted to hunt him. And I said no, and I was still polite and I was still cordial as was he, but he's never been back. So the guard is healthy, okay? But again, I'm not qualified to give you the advice as far as who specifically to befriend, who specifically to hang out with, because I've never figured that one out. I don't have those answers. I don't know. And when I was trying to think of the answers, the only person I could think of for some reason was a prospective princess of the Philippine Islands. So the answer I came up with was don't take anybody for granted, because the great power, not the powers that be that control social media or the social classes or the socioeconomics of the world, but whatever power is out there that's greater than me, that created this, I believe puts the people in our lives at the time they're meant to be there for specific reasons which we may or may never ever understand. And maybe that same power removes people from our life, as painful as it might be, at certain times, for certain reasons we may or may never understand. All we can hope is that those who mean most to us do come back at some time. But that decision really isn't up to us. So, proof of the disclaimer, I'm not qualified to give you any or all of this advice. Take it all with a grain of salt. But I do sincerely want to thank you for being here with me this morning for another morning ramble. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us on our channel, Homesteading Off the Grid. And that view was so beautiful, I think I'll give you another shot of it in parting. I hope each and every one of you have a great and blessed day. Perhaps the message was, when the student's ready, the master will appear.